Thank you. Yeah, I'm quite intrigued about the pop-up union. I hadn't heard anything about it until actually today, so it's quite a surprise. But yeah, I mean, I would always argue to use recognised trade unions as the first port of call, but to explore other things, I think it's quite a risky thing that you're doing. But you know, I never know, it might pay off. But I'd like to know more about that, Maia. But just very briefly to sum up here, yes, I mean, we've got to get something going now, or otherwise we're just not going to be able to cope. I mean, mentioned about children with special needs. I mean, who's going to look after them if we're not able to do that within a welfare state type education system? And the effect on family life is going to be absolutely horrendous. So we need to do something. We've got to be positive because there is always solutions, and working together, particularly at a grassroots level, with ideas coming up from the bottom, is always a good place to start. And use people that have got experience with putting strategies together, working together, and we could come up with something. I'm very well sure of that, and maybe use the LRC, you know, as a conduit for change. Thank you.
First, I'd like to agree. I think I do believe that EMA was actually a Blair's own idea. So EMA was absolutely fundamental. So in that terms, Blair actually, that was one legacy which he pushed for, which was immediately, well, the impact in terms of 16 plus education has been absolutely devastating. So that's one thing they can do automatically, which is that's why the headlines that they reinstate EMA on day one of a new Labour administration. Is that actually is that there?
That's there.
That is there.
Yeah,
that is there. That is a commitment. Yeah.
Put that campaign forward,
didn't they? The picking up on social justice thing. That's really critical, and I'm just going to talk about Hastings Borough Council for a moment. Hastings Borough Council is now completely dominated by Labour councillors. We won 7 of the 8 county council seats, unlike other parts of the South East, if you compare us to Thanet, which would be comparable. And there's an absolutely brilliant article from one of my comrades, Peter Chowney, in Labour Briefing, the LRC's publication. And his argument is that the reason why Labour is so dominant in Hastings is because the local Labour Party has a clear vision based on social justice. There's clear anti-poverty strategy. There's a clear emphasis on using whatever's available from the bid for the City of Culture to actually use that to push forward an interventionist and openly socialist agenda. And Labour councillors at least don't mind actually using the S word on the doorstep and across the town, and people aren't scared by that. Actually, this group of people do have some conviction, they're organised, and they have a clear policy. But the problem again is we're unable to engage on education at the borough level because it's been distanced from us, it's been being distanced even further from us. So for all of what we'd like to do, which is get our hands on education, to really talk about borough education, what's happening in our borough for our children, we're not able to do that, and it's being pushed further and further and further away from us through the academisation process. And that's what we've got to fight, and that's where parents become absolutely critical. I agree, we haven't used, and perhaps the left hasn't really thought about education in terms of how we're actually creating that dialogue with parents. But there's also a problem, which is they are dispersed, and it's a transitory constituency. Too often, actually, I'm sorry to say, parents will say, for the 5 years, I'm a teacher, I'm a parent governor, I'm engaged, then up, step back, it becomes the other. And that point, miraculously, once when the teacher was their friend, it was the person you bought the chocolates for, suddenly they're the Daily Mail villain of the piece, the teacher who's wanting to take industrial action. And it's almost this double thing going on, which is my way in, because I'd like to finish really with very profound words one of my colleagues wrote on the day of industrial action she was trying to conceptualise, she'd never been on strike before, what it meant to her when she took that step and stood on the picket line. And so I will read out just 2 elements. The first is, I will expose myself to the facetious, derogatory, misleading comments that will appear in the press about selfish, lazy, greedy teachers. And I will spend my day picketing, leafleting, and meeting with other people who care about the future of education, because I care. I will strike because I care about education, a democratic society where morality and the holistic development of the child should be as important as the league tables. I care that my children's generation, my generation and my parents' generation had access to an education system that put the child before corporate statistics. I will strike because I'm concerned by what might be the mission statement if education becomes a totally corporate institution. So I'm going to finish with those words.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I should also mention that Christine is my aunt, so any disagreement is absolutely...
She's been a very naughty little girl.
But, I mean, more seriously, I think, I mean, on the issue, you're absolutely right. We're going through the same rigmarole and we have to follow the same rules, and it's going to be even more difficult, you know, than if the registered trade unions were going through that process. I guess we have been able to do it very quickly, and as the lady behind you was saying, it is completely horizontal, and a lot of the people involved are very keen for that to be the case. I mean, what I've experienced, and you know, from discussions as well with Christine, is that I know the position that Unison, for example, and also UCU are in terms of being completely under-resourced and not being given the support that the campaign itself needs, and we are aware of that. I'm definitely aware of that. I mean, I'm in a difficult position because I know a lot of other people who are on campus, workers or students who know less of maybe what's going on and are very angry against the unions, and so it's very difficult to kind of try and play between all these different actors and how they feel. So it's tricky, there's no doubt about it. And as I said, I mean, it's, you know, we're learning bit by bit, so we're going to see how it goes. But it's just interesting, and I think what's important, and I guess, you know, I would like to stress, is that there are alternatives, and there are potential spaces institutionally and personally to try and organise in different ways. And I think whether there, in many cases, they might not be the most judicious direction to take, but in some cases they might be, and it's just great to be able to be here and to talk about this and to see, you know, how we can, because you know, at the end of the day, the pop-up union is not going to destroy existing unions. I mean, we're talking about old institutions that have been here and that have a lot of baggage, and so, but it's just about putting pressure, seeing, you know, I mean, we were talking about this as well in terms of certain campaigns. London Met, you mentioned, and other cases. I think it's Surrey. What were you talking about? That was UCLan, yeah. Where there, the support and what's happened with the existing trade union has been fantastic, and they've won campaigns. So, you know, I think that there's definite issues about what was going on at Sussex which needed to be addressed. So, you know, that which explains as well the rise of the pop-up union there. So again, it's not something general, it's something local, and I think that's something as well that I wanted to focus on in terms of the importance of local campaigns and to come back to the issue of building communities back together. So, yeah, again, loads of challenges ahead, but it's just positive to remember that there are alternatives, and it's important to keep those in mind. Yeah, I think I'll leave it to that.
If briefly I could add on to what Maia said. I'm a student. I would say that my vested interest in terms of the specific jobs on the campus where I'm studying are relatively low. I'm a transient. I'll be gone in less than a year. I'll be out of that campus, and based on probably how much the management will be back there, never coming back. I lived for 2 months in a conference centre, showering occasionally, eating not particularly well, not really sleeping. And I think very briefly, and again it is for sure a Sussex specific issue, and I'm not suggesting for a second that, you know, pop-up unions need to be in place left, right and centre, but to really pick up on what Maia said, you know, we had a situation where the students and the members of staff affected and the academic faculty were standing, putting their bodies on the line, wanting to do something to defend their institution, their university and their community. And no one, in terms of the trade unions, were coming up and joining. There was hesitance, there was reluctance to be involved. You know, this campaign in Sussex started in May last year, so we're talking 12 months ago. And in that time, nothing had really happened. And as much as we can, you know, question the nature of the pop-up union, for instance, in relation to other trade unions, it's only really due to the existence of the pop-up union that the question's being brought back to the table of you know, taking action, moving forward with these ballots, because otherwise it happened 12 months ago and it didn't. I think if students had followed the same idea of sticking to the current status, sticking to the strands, as we've said earlier, you know, students within the NUS would be doing nothing and wouldn't be standing out on demonstrations, would be carrying placards like they did in 2012, holding signs saying educate, empower, employ, as if that's what the students demanding. We need employment. That's what the students should be fighting for, is better jobs. So I think if we try and make certain things unattainable in terms of questioning the union policies that exist and not really pushing them to reconsider, if we put that into other frameworks, if we said leave government to do what it's doing, it's probably doing the right thing. If we just leave the NUS, then we'd be nowhere. So we really need to be critically engaging with those organisations that do exist and pushing them to continue really making them, challenging them. And I suppose I've ranted for a long time about education, but I think the one thing I'd really like to push home is that what I feel I need to be doing, and what I feel all of us need to be doing, is to really ensuring that university education, as well as obviously primary and secondary, which I think the market, as you said, is slightly less in play than university. It's very much a market. We see it as a market. We're paying to be there. That we really allow ourselves as students, as staff, as people who just exist and have a vested interest in education and universities, to really ensure that question is continuously posed and put on the table. We have policymakers who are making these decisions who received a free education, who had the benefit of a university degree, and yet we're told that we don't deserve one because we can't physically do it. And I think the way I'd probably summate all of that is that, as I said, when the NUS, which is the thing I meant to be equating myself to, told me that we couldn't have a free education because it would disadvantage the poor, we need to really reconsider whether we're fighting within the current framework of what education exists as in this market, or if we're wanting to take ourselves out of the market and wholly reconsider the state of education as a whole. That's sort of where I'd leave it.